On August 5th, a digital query was logged from a residential IP address in Rochester, Minnesota. The search string was direct. Internet browsing history. Can it be used in court? The individual behind the keyboard was Dr. Connor Bowman. He was a clinical resident at the world-famous Mayo Clinic and a former specialist at a poison control center. This search was not a theoretical inquiry for a medical journal, nor was it a casual curiosity. It was a deliberate test of his own digital perimeter. 11 days after this search was recorded, his wife, Dr. Betty Bowman, a respected clinical pharmacist at the very same hospital, was admitted to the emergency room with acute, unexplained organ failure.
To understand how a poison control specialist came to be accused of executing a mathematically precise assassination of his spouse, we must look past the pristine white coats and the institutional prestige of their shared workplace. We have to analyze the data points where professional expertise intersected with domestic calculation. Betty was 32. By all accounts, her life was structured around precision. As a clinical hospital pharmacist, her daily routine involved verifying medication dosages, cross-referencing drug interactions, and ensuring that human error did not compromise patient safety. Her colleagues described her as meticulous, deeply practical, and fiercely loyal to her friends. Connor, at 30, was operating in a parallel high-stakes environment. He understood toxicological thresholds. He was the person other medical professionals consulted when a patient ingested a lethal dose of an unknown substance. He knew how toxins traveled through the bloodstream, how they metabolized in the liver, and most importantly, how they could evade standard hospital screening panels. On the surface, the Bowmans represented a highly successful, double-income medical household, but the financial and personal logs paint a vastly different picture. The couple had transitioned into an open marriage, a structural shift that, according to witnesses, was rapidly collapsing under the weight of jealousy and emotional distance. Connor was also managing severe, unpublicized financial debt.
Let us analyze the first major anomaly in the timeline. In the weeks preceding Betty's hospitalization, Connor's professional database logs registered a highly specific pattern of behavior. He began using his administrative credentials to bypass the standard patient matching protocols at the Poison Control Center.
Actually, let me rephrase that.
He did not merely bypass the protocols, he deliberately manipulated the system. He used his credentials to research a substance he had no active clinical cases for: colchicine. Colchicine is an alkaloid, historically derived from the autumn crocus plant. In microdosages, it is used to treat gout. In macrodosages, it is a highly lethal cellular poison. To understand the chemical mechanics of colchicine is to understand biological demolition. It binds to tubulin, a protein essential for cell division. Once inside the body, it halts mitosis entirely. Cells can no longer replicate or repair themselves. In simple terms, a lethal dose of colchicine behaves like localized radiation. It systematically liquefies the rapidly dividing cells of the gastrointestinal tract before moving on to destroy the bone marrow, the kidneys, and the heart. Because it presents initially as severe diarrhea and vomiting, it is frequently misdiagnosed as food poisoning or an aggressive viral infection.
This brings us to what we will call
the lethal threshold mapping. On Connor's seized personal devices, investigators recovered a deleted spreadsheet. The data revealed that Connor had entered a specific variable, 115 pounds. This was Betty's exact body weight. He then converted that weight into kilograms, 52.1, and multiplied it by 0.8. Why 0.8? Because in toxicological literature, 0.8 milligrams per kilogram is the exact mathematical threshold where colchicine poisoning becomes irreversible and fatal. Connor was not researching a drug. He was calibrating a target. The evening of August 16th, Betty returned to their Rochester home. She was in excellent health. Shortly after consuming a homemade smoothie prepared by her husband, she began experiencing acute gastrointestinal distress.
By the morning of August 17th, her condition had deteriorated to the point of clinical emergency. She was rushed to the Mayo Clinic. Her own colleagues, the doctors and nurses she worked alongside every day, began a desperate battle to stabilize her. As Betty lay in the intensive care unit, her organs failing one by one, The medical team was entirely in the dark. Standard hospital toxicology panels search for common street drugs, pain relievers, and common prescription overdoses. They do not screen for obscure gout medications unless specifically instructed to do so. Connor was present in the room. He maintained the posture of a concerned, highly analytical medical spouse. He used his knowledge to suggest alternative, complex medical explanations. He proposed that Betty was suffering from a rare, hyper-aggressive autoimmune flare-up, or perhaps an exceptionally severe case of food poisoning. But the local network logs from the hospital's patient family Wi-Fi tell a different story.
While Betty was hooked to a ventilator, her blood pressure cratering, Connor was using his mobile device to check dating applications. He was actively editing his bio. He was also entering another search query. Is widow gender neutral? He was already linguistic mapping his new identity before her heart had officially stopped. On August 20th, Betty Bowman was pronounced dead. The initial tentative cause of death was listed as bilateral lung infiltrates and multi-organ failure of unknown etiology. Immediately following her death, Connor initiated a sequence of rapid logistical decisions. He contacted the medical examiner's office and strongly argued against performing an autopsy. He claimed that Betty's death, while tragic, was clearly the result of a rare autoimmune condition, and that she would have wanted to avoid any invasive post-mortem procedures. He requested that her body be released immediately to a local funeral home for cremation. He scheduled the cremation for the earliest possible slot. The physical evidence of the colchicine was roughly 48 hours away from being permanently incinerated.
But the domestic baseline has its own silent alarms. A close friend of Betty's, aware of the marital breakdown, the open relationship, and Connor's mounting financial crises, contacted the medical examiner's office directly. She stated, in no uncertain terms, that Betty's sudden death was highly anomalous, and that Connor's haste to cremate her body was a profound deviation from normal behavior. The medical examiner halted the cremation. The state intervened, and the autopsy proceeded. This triggered the analytical chase. Because the local crime lab was dealing with an suspect who understood the limitations of forensic testing, the toxicology team had to deploy high-precision instrumentation, utilized liquid chromatography mass spectrometry, or LCMS. In LCMS, a liquid sample of the victim's blood is pressurized and passed through a chemical column. Different compounds travel through this column at different speeds based on their molecular weight and structure. As they emerge, they are ionized and blasted with an electron beam, breaking the molecules into distinct fragments. This creates a highly specific molecular fingerprint.
The mass spectrometry scan of Betty's blood sample did not return a complex autoimmune marker. It returned a massive, unmistakable peak at the exact molecular weight of colchicine. The concentration in her blood was multiple times the lethal limit. Betty had never been prescribed colchicine. She had no history of gout. With this data in hand, police executed a search warrant at the Bowman residence. Inside the home, they recovered a receipt from a chemical supply company. The order was placed using Connor's Mayo Clinic email address. It was for liquid colchicine. They also found a bank statement showing a payment to the same chemical supplier, and the mathematical spreadsheet detailing the weight-based dosage calculations.
Furthermore, investigators discovered that Connor was set to collect a $500,000 life insurance payout upon Betty's death, a sum that would instantly liquidate his personal debts. In January 2024, a grand jury indicted Dr. Connor Bowman on charges of first-degree premeditated murder. His defense team mounted an aggressive legal strategy, attempting to throw out the indictment and suppress the digital evidence, arguing that the search warrants were overly broad. But in mid-2026, the court rejected these motions. The state's digital and chemical evidence remains fully admissible. What makes this case so deeply unsettling is the intersection of high intellect and profound arrogance. Connor Bowman believed that because he understood the technical parameters of the system, he could manipulate them without detection. He calculated the exact physical tolerances of his wife's body, but failed to calculate the human variables, the loyalty of a friend who refused to let her death go unexamined, and the absolute impartiality of a laboratory scanner.
When you look closely at this digital trail, the deliberate searches, the calculated formulas, the dating app activity while his wife was on life support, do you see a highly organized executioner or a desperate man whose intelligence ultimately blinded him to his own obvious errors? Let me know your perspective in the comments below. We often operate under the assumption that those who study the mechanics of life are the most equipped to preserve it. In reality, they are merely the most equipped to calculate the exact cost of destroying it.